Welcome back. Let's take a look at what's leading the Sunday papers today. As expected, they are, of course, dominated by the strikes against Syria. Sunday Express, well, its headline, "A strike at the heart of evil." It says that Theresa May and Donald Trump have hailed it the perfect mission. The Mail on Sunday, we'll pop it. Yeah, we go. Mission accomplished, the words used by President Trump on Twitter yesterday, and I seem to recall another president at some point. However, the Sunday Telegraph suggests the strikes may not be over after Trump said last night that America is locked and loaded for more attacks if necessary. Trouble brewing for Theresa May at home after she ordered action without first consulting MPs. That's the story in the front of The Observer. And the Sunday Times concentrates on the victims of Syria's chemical weapons, picturing one little girl who survived the April 7th attack. Well, joining me to discuss all that, the Foreign Affairs writer Tim Marshall, political commentator Jane Merrick, and convener of Stop the War, Lindsay German. Lovely to see you all, guys. Tim, because you used to work here, let's go straight for your story, shall we?
Very kind.
Strangely enough, Syria has caught your attention today.
Yeah.
Did everything pretty much play out as people were expecting it?
Well, no, because there was some mild hysteria about World War III in the run-up to it. Not on this channel, I would hasten to add. So the people that expected World War III just didn't understand what was going on. I think people that follow the coded language that is used will not be surprised at what happened, which is why I wanted to start on this graphic.
This is the graphic from the Sunday Times.
But Sunday Times, simply because it was a double-page spread and it's quite sort of dramatic. But every single paper has got similar graphics. Now, some people criticise this sort of stuff as, oh, it's horrible warmongering, it's boys' toys. I think that's a little patronising to the amount of women that are involved in both the decision-making process and then the carrying out of whatever that decision is. But also, how else are you supposed to understand what happened when there's not that much footage? And also, when you know how to read this stuff, it tells you things. See, at the far left, point number 2 here. I mean, there's something in every single point, but point number 2, the RAF tornadoes swing north to an area outside of Syrian airspace. And that immediately tells you, we're not getting any pilots shot down on this, because that would absolutely raise the stakes of everything. And again, when you look at in the round, what happened was the Americans felt they had to have the red line, and it was crossed, and they were going to do something about it. The British and the French fell into line. They all calculated the Russians' pain threshold, and then they came in well underneath it, probably because of Mattis in the United States. So they came in well under the Russians' pain threshold. They rang up the Russians and said, you've got about we're not coming for you, but you've got about an hour to get out of the way, just in case you're somewhere we don't know about. They rang them up an hour afterwards and said, right, you can come out again now. So what was accomplished was the Russians get to rattle their sabres, but not have to do anything about it. The three powers get to underline what is the fundamental point of what happened, which is a red line about chemical weapons, and they can say, we did something about it, you're on notice. If you ever do it again, we will do it again. But finally, sorry, Neil, finally, Assad gets to carry on murdering his own people with barrel bombs, but maybe not with chemicals.
I mean, Lindsay, was it wrong for Donald Trump to declare this, you know, a red line, almost a strict liability test? If chemical weapons are used once again in Syria, we will take military action.
Well, I think what's wrong is not to oppose chemical weapons, which I think we all do, but to think that you can just take this kind of action, which I think is almost certainly illegal. If you look at international law, there are only really 2 conditions, self-defence and a UN resolution. Neither of those was present in this. I don't see what it's achieved. I think, as one politician described it recently, it's a gesture rather than a serious military operation. And what it's about is trying to, in the case of France, Britain and the US, making this stand, knowing that really it won't affect what's going on wider in the Middle East, which has huge implications, possibly for a future Third World War, to be quite frank.
Jen, I saw you shaking your head there.
I think it's really easy to get distracted by Donald Trump's tweets and his quotes about mission accomplished, and it's very easy to do that. But the point is, Assad caused this, not Trump. It was Assad's chemical attack in Douma last weekend which led to this response. And as Tim mentioned, the Mattis Mattis is the person who's worth listening to because he is the one who thinks it's a one-off attack, and we have to send they had to send the Russians and the Syrians a message, and that was clearly that I think Tim's laid out very clearly what the reasoning was, and we need to listen to Mattis. But in terms of legal backing, actually, they could have used, I mean, international lawyers have said this overnight, they could have used UN Security Council Resolution 2118, which was brought in after 2013, but they didn't need to do that because they have this forcible humanitarian action, which is a doctrine that's been used since the 90s in Sierra Leone.
You mean responsibility to protect?
Yes.
Yeah, but that does need UN sanction. It can't just be used in this kind of way. And unless there is an immediate threat, which there wasn't to actually, even in the situation in Douma, wasn't an immediate threat. So there's no real justification for it.
Opponents hide behind the legality, which I agree with you is questionable and debatable. I agree with that. But RP2, responsibility to protect, if you're going to say, yes, I like that as a concept, but then you know the Russians will veto it every single time. What you're doing is hiding behind legality because you don't actually like action.
That isn't my only argument against this strike. And as you've just said, Tim, the Russians actually gave the coordinates in this particular attack. So the Russians were completely involved in this. They knew it was happening. Syria knew it was happening.
But just in terms of the legality, I mean, I think back to Kosovo. I mean, didn't the Independent Commission there rule that it was illegal, the intervention, but legitimate, because the diplomatic routes had been exhausted and there was an immediate threat to life, through which no other channel was there an opportunity.
That was a very, very controversial decision, though. And I mean, many people said that actually there were other channels.
But it was still the right thing to do.
And let's remember, in Douma, this is when the Organisation for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons, it's the day they'd actually gone into Douma. So why not wait and see what they decide?
5 days after the Russians went in there and cleaned everything up.
Well, I just think, I don't think this is helping with any of the things that we're talking about with the problems of the Syrian war, to tell the truth.
Well, just in terms, let's pick up on your story then, Lindsay, which is in the Mail on Sunday, and it is domestic reflection on taking military action. Richard Bergen was describing it as going to war. I don't think we're quite there yet. But it does certainly feel like the weight of public opinion, as things stand, is with the opposition benches and not with the government. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, certainly from the point of view of our campaigning, we've had people phoning off the hook. We've had Orkney, we've been told there's a demonstration tomorrow night. The demonstrations throughout the country against this. And that's a big change. And if you look at this opinion poll, it shows only 36% support the bombing raids, 40% against, so there's a majority against. 54% say it's wrong for May to have done it without going to Parliament, and I think that's going to be a very important debate. Sorry to interrupt, Lindsay, but don't you think that that is because of, in one word, Iraq? And Iraq, in terms of a parallel example to what's happening in Syria, is not a particularly useful one?
Well, I think it's about Iraq in the sense that people don't trust prime ministers and politicians to do so, because they were taken into war on the basis of a lie, and therefore people are much more sceptical about evidence that is produced by the intelligence services and so on than they would have been probably 20 years ago. But obviously it's not comparable with Iraq, but I think people fear that the war in Syria is coming to an end. What does this mean for the future? What does it mean for Iran? What does it mean? Saudi and Israel are very much determined. We now have John Bolton, Secretary of State for Donald Trump, who is a hawk where Iran is concerned. So I think people are looking to the future as well as this immediate question. I mean,
one consequence, it appears from reading elsewhere in the papers this morning, is the Russians are now considering selling off that missile defence system. But in terms of confidence in our intelligence agencies, is there ever going to be an occasion in the next 50 years in which, MI5, MI6 tell the Prime Minister that something's going to happen, the Prime Minister tells the public something's going to happen, she needs to take action, and the public don't say, no, wait a minute, we want to see this intelligence as well?
I think it's extraordinary, actually, and obviously Iraq did have a huge impact in terms of the national psyche, but I think it's also ironic that actually Parliament did vote for the war in Iraq. So that's, if you want to sort of get caught up in legality, then there would be no legal problem with the war in Iraq, would there, because Parliament voted for it. And the thing is that
most of them think they were wrong to have done so.
Well, no, of course, but that's a separate issue. But the Parliament there is a convention established since 2003, but Theresa May didn't have to recall Parliament. I think politically it probably would have been sensible to do it on Friday, but she didn't have to do it. And I think, but talking about the intelligence agencies, I think it's extraordinary to hear Jeremy Corbyn and others sort of cast doubt about Salisbury. I just think that there is a confidence issue there. I trust the intelligence services and I trust what's going on in Salisbury. And I just think it's very strange for politicians, particularly the leaders of the opposition, to cast doubt in such a in a conspiratorial way.
You'll know, being steeped in politics, that tomorrow's a big day in Parliament.
Huge.
There was uniformity almost in most of the press today comes out in favour of what the action was taken. That's the media, I'm not talking about the public necessarily. Where the papers diverge is this split about whether there should have been a vote or not. And in the poll that Lindsay's brought up, the second one, was Mrs May right to order strikes without MPs backing? Wrong, says 54%. I mean, there clearly is a debate to be had, and tomorrow in Parliament, that debate will be had, and that will play out over a couple of days. And then I suspect the story will fade.
Jane, I thought I was going to have a week without Brexit, but no, you've stuffed that. Thank you. Mail on Sunday.
Apologise.
What are you thinking?
Tell us about this. A lovely picture, actually, of Anna Soubry and Chukwuemeka.
It is, and actually, I think on this, particularly with these two, it's a great example of where cross-party consensus on issues, huge issues facing the country like Brexit, are really important. That they've got so much divisiveness in British politics that it's really good to see two people like this come together. I mean, it's not just that, but the Lib Dems as well, come together and call for a people's vote, they're calling, on Brexit. I mean, they're trying to say this is not a second referendum, but I think good luck with that, because a lot of people will say that it is. But also, not just this cross-party alliance, this rally today, but we mustn't forget Brexit is always going on, despite what else is happening in the world. And this week, the House of Lords will start to go through the line-by-line amending the bill on the EU withdrawal. And I think that's really important because the government could face defeat there.
Lindsay, I presume, given the coalition has brought together disparate groups for one purpose, you welcome this, Tories, Labour, joining together?
I don't welcome this particular coalition. I think that a second referendum would be a political catastrophe in this country. I think it would lead to the growth of far-right parties.
Leave aside the politics of it for a second.
What you mean, whether Chukwuemeka and Anna Soubry can get on okay? Well, that's entirely up to them. But I think we need to look at it more seriously. Any second referendum, even if it reverses the decision, would be very similar margin, I think, you know, a narrow margin for Remain or Leave. So, to me, I think we have to accept the decision and then we have to talk about what kind of politics, what sort of society we want to build. And that's what Jeremy Corbyn and people are trying to do. I
mean, I don't know about you, Tim, but I set my watch these days by the creation or the talking about the creation of a new centre party to do something about Brexit.
The money's there, but the timing's wrong. There will not be a new centre party probably until after the next election. And then depending on how Labour do, if they fall apart catastrophically, the Corbyn days may be numbered and the moderates come back. If they win power, that's it, and then the centrist party comes. So we're a couple of years away. Briefly, I just want to say I agree with Jane about I do like to see a Tory and Labour coming together, because I do think that the social discourse, political discourse in this country has taken a sharp turn downwards, and it is very unhealthy for the body politic. I'd also say, I disagree with nearly everything that Lindsay ever says. I'm fundamentally opposed to nearly
I'm sure you can't know about everything
well,
that I
everything.
ever say.
But we haven't talked football yet. But
that'll be a short
But this is an example of, despite me fundamentally disagreeing with it, it is possible to have this discourse. And I do like this story about only for that reason, because I just think the second referendum is just not going to happen, but people will also not stop trying to make it happen.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were looking for. This kind of love-in when we booked this.
No, you weren't.
Because
TV loves people shouting at each other.
And we used to employ you as well, Tim, yeah, for obvious reasons. Guys, thank you so much for coming in. Great stuff.